There's a lot of eating and drinking in the Bible. In both the Old and New Testaments, there's lots of stories about people eating and drinking, and there's lots of stories that show people doing that. So I thought it would be interesting to see how many we can think of. And we're going to do it like this. We're going to use the chat that we have on our screens. So if you're able to do so, use the chat and put in the chat any examples that you can think of where people are eating and drinking in the Bible, or talking about eating and drinking. And we'll see how long it takes us to get to 10. I can see some people raring to go already. So let's see what we can come up with. Stories about people eating and drinking. Whoa! That's amazing. Let's see if we can get down to the bottom of that screen. Yes, 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 yes. Fantastic. Any more? Yeah. Wonderful. We'll stop there. I'll read them out for the benefit of those people that can't access that. We've got Jesus turning water into wine, the Last Supper, feeding of the 5,000, Passover, Elijah, ravens and meat, Adam and Eve eating apple, wedding, breakfast on the beach, fish, Belshazzar's feast, Zacchaeus' house for a meal, widow and her son, Feast of Tabernacles, Joseph having a feast with his brothers. Some people put one down that was already there, so you'll forgive me if I didn't read it twice. That's amazing. That took us such a short time to get to all of those, because there's lots of examples and there's many more that we could have had. So eating and drinking is a big feature of Bible life. And it means something. When you sit down to eat and drink with other people, it has a meaning. One thing it means is trust, because if you're armed, you have to put down your weapons in order to sit down and eat and drink with somebody. That's perhaps an example not so much from today, but in the past that was very true. It's a sign of welcome. It's a sign of hospitality. It's a sign of agreement that we are together. We are on the same side. We're not against each other. It's a sign of commitment. It's a sign of belonging. So all these things, eating and drinking can mean, and more, I'm sure, as well. And so when we sit down to eat and drink communion together, the bread and the wine, we bring all of those meanings to it. So we're thinking about sitting down together in agreement. We're on the same side. There's hospitality. There's welcome. In that lovely song that we had at the beginning, these things are very much to the fore. There's trust. There's belonging. There's commitment. So if all of those things are expressed just in ordinarily eating and drinking together, how much more when we sit down together to eat and drink the bread and the wine that remind us of Jesus's death on the cross for us, the thing that brings us together. Because let's face it, looking at all the faces on this screen at the moment, I wouldn't know most of you if it wasn't for Jesus. Jesus brings us together from such different communities and backgrounds and places in the world, languages, all the things that are different between us. But Jesus brings us together. So eating and drinking the things that remind us of Jesus's death for us is even more significant than just eating and drinking ordinary meals, and those are significant too, as we've seen. There's so many of them in the Bible. So Paul is writing this passage that Asher read to us in the context of people going to temples and worshipping, the things that Clive showed us on those slides. So people went to the temple in Jerusalem, the Jewish temple, where they made those sacrifices and ate together. But there were also other temples of the gods that we saw in Clive's slides, where people would go and do the same thing. They would offer sacrifice and they would eat the food together. So when you sat down in the temple of some other god, apart from the God of Israel, all those meanings about eating and drinking together were still there. Meanings about belonging, agreement, welcome, hospitality, if you were in the temple of God or if you were in the temple of one of the idols, of which there were loads. So you have to think, what is implied if the Christians in Corinth were doing both of those things? They were eating in the temple of the one God of Israel and in the temple of some of the other gods. You might think, well, that sounds like a very long time ago. It's not got much to do with me. But I think this can be an issue for some of us still. Many of us have family members or friends who belong to other faiths, and many of those other faiths use eating and drinking together as a way of saying we belong together, we are in agreement. So if that's you, then this passage is saying perhaps you need to think about what is implied in sharing in that eating and drinking. And as Paul says, you have to work out for yourselves, and as Clive said, you have to work out for yourselves what this means for you. So if you are in that position, think about what is written here. Think about what Paul says about sitting down together and eating and drinking, showing that you are in agreement, that you are belonging together. But for many of us, we'll think, well, that doesn't have anything to do with me. I don't really find myself in that situation. So what can we get from that if that's us? I think it's to do with sitting down at the table of the Lord with all that that implies, and then going off and doing things which are totally the opposite of that. So we say that sitting down at the table of the Lord together implies that we are on the same side, we belong together, we are in agreement. So if we then go off and gossip about other people, like I was talking about last time I was with you, or spread rumours about other people, or say bad things about other people, that is the complete opposite of what we have meant by sitting down to eat and drink together. If we insult each other, if we ignore each other, if we talk about church as being them rather than us, it makes a mockery of everything that we have said by sitting down and eating and drinking together at the table of the Lord, the bread and the wine. If we then go off and live lives that are immoral, doing things that are wrong, that we know are wrong, again, it makes a mockery. Idolatry is the thing that Paul speaks about a lot. Idolatry just means putting anything else in the place where God ought to be. That could be another person, or it could be some other thing. But idolatry, putting something else or someone else where God should be in our lives, the first place. So when we sit down together, as we shortly will, let's remember that we can't do that and then go off and do things that just make a mockery of sitting down together, of the belonging, the acceptance, the love, the following of Jesus that sitting down together for communion implies. So when we do sit down together shortly, it's not like we're having a mid-morning coffee and a biscuit. The bread and the wine is not a little snack like that. When we eat the bread and drink from the cup, we're saying something profound about who we are and whose we are. We belong to God and to each other. So as we get up from the table after, we need to go and live in a way that shows that, in a way that reflects all that sitting down together to eat and drink means.